So, do you guys want to introduce yourselves?
I'm Janet Murray. I teach interaction design at Georgia Tech.
My name is Kat Schneider, and I am an architect and interface designer at Arrow Street, which is an architecture firm in Boston.
And I'm Cindy Bishop. I am founder of VR Doodler, which is a AR, VR, web, VR open source platform. And I'm also at the MIT Media Lab as an interactive artist.
Okay.
So how about I throw this out there? AR, how is AR art going to make us any money?
Yeah,
That's a great question.
Exactly what I don't care about.
I can send that one to the audience.
Okay, now we can go. Now, this is going to be interesting.
Anyone in the audience have any thoughts?
I'm sure Tomiko has a couple of ideas about that.
I haven't made money on the art yet.
So I have some general responses that I could say, and then maybe you guys will disagree in
John
interesting
told me
ways.
it was okay. I should be on this.
Oh, good.
Welcome.
Because I haven't been on a panel really with Janet
Can you
Murray
answer the
yet,
question?
And so now I get to be. Okay.
The question on the table, Ken, is how
Good.
do we make art with AR art?
How do we make art?
How do we,
with
how do we make money with
You
art?
add a T. At the, no. Art, yeah.
The best talk at the conference by far, this one.
And the T.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, is tech.
How do you make money? You're talking about art, right?
Yeah.
I don't think people go into art because they're making money. I think they do commerce like Jeff Koons or something. You know, I don't think they really make art. I'm sure you agree, right, that you don't go into art to make money.
Well, yes, but I'm setting up my master plan to
Oh, I
talk
see.
about
Okay,
it later,
okay,
yeah.
yeah. Then I'd love to
So
hear your plan.
you know what'd be a good way to phrase it is, why should the people who are looking to make money from this technology, why should they fund art? And I think I could make the case for that.
Let's hear it.
So I think that they should fund art because we are at this stage where it is a new means of representation. It's not yet a medium, and we don't really know how to use it. I think one thing my takeaway from here is that I have seen two very concrete use cases, and they both had to do with data representation. And then I heard a lot of ideas about potential use cases that are very promising, but that people have not instantiated yet. And I guess, there's a third use case, which is Pokemon, right? Which is a replicable genre. Let me finish my thought.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
So, yeah, I know, but let me just finish it. So why should, at this moment, when we are struggling to figure out what are the coherent uses of the technology, and where people come up with a 3D headset, and then, as one of the previous speakers said, you try it on and the demo is so disappointing, you think, well, forget about it. I don't want to even, continue with this. I think that what art can do is to find the plasticity in the clay. So the art can push at the boundaries of representation without having an instrumental use case and without applying standard conventions that happen to fit and then make everybody a lot of money the way Pokemon Go does, but that express something about what Tony Duff called the cultural imaginary, about what does this mean to us that we have this means of putting strange things in our world. And we need art to do that. We need it to make meaning, but we also need it just to progress the form, to progress the way in which we do things.
We throw the term around a lot at the Media Lab called Imagineering, and science fiction has typically been the precursor to what we've actually developed, and in the same way, artists are it's important for artists to be able to innovate, and if they don't have the tools and the means by which to innovate, how are we going to have those ideas actually come into fruition?
I just wanted to mention that the question that Janet asked, I thought Janet gave the definitive answer to. I couldn't improve on that.
And so from my mouth, and you're agreeing with it to the ears of the people who actually have the money to give to the actual artists.
Although there is precedent for that. I mean, Bell Labs in the 1960s, there are certainly a lot of examples through history of people who are at the centers of new technological possibility, understanding that they basically just say, let's just find really great artists and let them have free reign, and actually even have supported artists in residence. That has happened at other eras of history, and hopefully there'll be enough the kind of enlightenment about what artists are capable of that will continue to happen.
So I think art, definitely, I'm an architect, so I think about spaces a lot and the spatial implications of all of this technology that we've talked about here today. And what fascinates me about the convergence of art and architecture is how we can utilize augmented reality to visualize data in a public space in a palpable way that can inform how you interact in that space or your expectation of what that space is there for. So, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, one thing I was thinking about during the panel on New York City as a venue, which is very exciting to me, as I realized the other day that I always say I'm from New York, though I have not actually lived in New York in like 50 years or something. But my children assured me that I was totally from New York, and there was no mistaking it. So I think my accent gets, the farther away I get, the deeper my New York accent gets. So I was very engaged by that, but I thought of what do I really want to see visualized in New York? Suppose you did have 100 buildings that you're going to visualize. I want to see how many middle-class people used to live in those neighborhoods 50 years ago and 30 years ago, and how many are living there now. I want to see how many of those buildings Jason Kushner owns, and Jared Kushner owns, and with his family, and how much money he owes on each of those buildings. I want to know how many are rental and how many are co-op, and how many, and what are the rules for getting into those co-ops. So I also, every time you go past the building in New York, there's such a rich sense of the history. I really would love to have each of them annotated with the time travel of the cityscape. But the question, we sometimes naively talk about what we're going to visualize without thinking about what is invisible to us right now. Which data is going to be represented? Is it going to be the data that helps the financial industry to do quick, faster gambling on the resources of human labor? Or is it going to be data that the UN gathers on child mortality?
I think about the accessibility of data and also the accessibility of tools. And it seems like the familiarity that I have with each of your work, and also what I'm particularly interested in are the tools. And somebody made a plug for WebVR, which also, by the way, lends itself to WebAR, and that is open source. And I think, that's kind of back to the original question, which is, or that I like to play around with, which is, AR or art may not make money, but the people who are imagining what they could make need those tools, and artists need tools that are easy to use and not expensive. So I'm not sure that there are a lot of tools out there by which artists can start to create. Why should you have to know Unity in order to create something? And it's kind of blockish. It's not freeform. Some people are doing some freeform creation tools, which are really interesting. But I'm not sure how we're going to get there unless we really make a emphasis on giving those tools to people who need them.
Well, we're open sourcing all our freeform creation tools.
Great.
I'd like to hear that.
Great.
I think an interesting point to think about with art in general too, and even the monetization of it or how you make money off of it is how can art in public spaces, in private spaces, at least for me, how can augmented art cause action or prompt action or call someone to action? And I feel like if there are installations and things like that that are in public spaces that call someone to do something different than what, or disrupt, popular tech word, disrupt their flow, that is certainly something that's worth monetary value to any number of people.
I want to mention a related topic because we've talked about spaces and architecture a lot so far. So people like Tamiko Thiel and Mark Swarek, who's here, I think he's probably listening upstairs, who's at NYU, have done a number of interesting projects where, and many others now, where you augmentedly modify a space so that if people choose to look at that space as a community with, their phones or whatever, now they're seeing either, your markings, they're seeing the community's markings, or they're seeing a commentary on the space. And the reason I think this is very profound is that there was that kind of weird controversy about when, the Pokemon started showing up at one of the death camps, from the former death camp, the Nazis, and this guy was horrified to find out that his child was like running into it, and the kid just said, "I don't understand the point. What's the problem?" And it's like just didn't even understand why that would be a problem, because there was this generational separation suddenly between the meaning of the physical and the virtual space that, I'm from the earlier generation. To me, it seems like a problem. But I'm wondering if we're starting to see artists kind of need to be part of that conversation about what augmented reality how it will transform our understanding of even the meaning of a physical location.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's also interesting to think about, with Pokemon Go, things spawn and things like that. But like you said, you have no control about where they spawn or
even what they look like.
Right, and if they're offensive or people have controversial feelings about them at all. So the interesting thing about, I guess, creating artistic content in AR is how do you create that sense of censorship or appropriateness? Because we can create the place, but we don't necessarily control the augmented layers of information that are projected on it.
Do you want to take this opportunity to talk about some of what you can do? Does everybody know about Holodeck and the tools and the open source that?
Oh, well, actually, I think that we have this ability for people to have these sort of shared experiences in the same space. So it's like, and then we also have this software layer on top of that called Chalk Talk, which some people here have seen, where you can make drawings and the drawings come to life and become animated characters and simulations. And the whole goal is that people can use something that's sort of more free form, and again, the phrase I used yesterday morning is Harry Potter meets Harold and the Purple Crayon, where people make a drawing and, oh, that's an animated character and it's in my world. And so we're trying to understand what that kind of creation by people of creatures and things. So it's not like, oh, I buy something from the store. It's more like I decided to make that, and everybody can have an artistic input. But it's a research exploration. We're open sourcing the tools, but it's not a product. It's a set of, research enabling tools. So hopefully other people will do things with it that we wouldn't have dreamed of.
Any questions from the audience?
Oh, no questions.
Well, Janet's right here. Right.
Yeah.
Janet, do you have any questions?
Or how about a challenge? What would our challenge be
I'm teasing you, yes.
to the community here?
Yeah.
What would our challenge be going forward for focus in AR and with regards to art and design?
So I think the problem at this moment is, I guess I would want to call to people's attention, thinking about the design part, that people start with the human need, that we can do all these thought experiments of what could you do if you had this space in front of us to put objects in. But if you're actually going to make something, it should answer a particular human need of somebody that you know. And that because you can't design something in the abstract otherwise. And I think that and I think we should recognize that the platforms are not stable. So it is not a time to expect that there's going to be a widespread adaption of anything that's not on a phone, because they're just not out there. And if there isn't a good reason to do it with a phone, then maybe it's not that worth doing. I think that people had a lot of ideas for things here that were pointless to do in AR. So I think the point is, but that AR is just a fascinating idea. So the question is, what do you want to do that is really determined by something spatial? And are you using the procedural power of the computer at all, or are you just sort of tacking a note somewhere? Because if you're tacking a note, you might as well just look at that on your phone. But if you're making something that, so I think that there's probably a space for interactive models that are going to take a lot longer to design and be maybe less sexy to people than the idea of, finding the restaurant menu has changed to accommodate you or something. But that I think that trying to think, and I think that it also, AR engenders the already virulent epidemic of magical thinking about data. So people think that the fact that you could put it in front of you is going to somehow make the data more accurate than it is already. So, so I would just issue those cautions. Try to think of something that an actual person could use and that you actually know the data works for, and that uses the fact that it's a computer and not a sticky note in order to achieve it.
Yeah, so first of all, I want to point out, because I didn't have a chance to say it before, Anishka and I were going to say earlier that the reason we called it the NYU holodeck was actually because we were inspired by Hamlet on the holodeck. So you actually were the inspiration for that whole research effort.
And I got none of the $4 million.
But not yet.
I mean, where are my students?
Not yet, right. The grant is young. But then I obviously I agree with Janet, but I also wanted to add something that I think Sofia Dominguez said something this morning in her opening talk, which I think is crucial for us to remember, which is, other than Google Glass, we have not yet seen a consumer item that does an ocular intervention of any kind in face-to-face conversation, which means we have literally no idea of what we would do with it, because we haven't actually had it yet. And as I go back to what I said yesterday morning, it would be like trying to think up Lyft or Uber without there being a smartphone. There are some things that you just kind of have to live with it for a while to even start to think in certain directions. And I think that ties back as the last thought to what Janet said, which is that's what we have artists for.